Alright guys, this is a new series that I want to start. It is about bow pairings. Today we'll be talking about the sword and shield. In each of these videos we'll be covering 4 main categories. There's also a secret shield later in the video that I'll be talking about that not many people know about but could be crucial to game modes such as Wars and OPR. And watching this video early could help you get a jump on farming this mob for the shield drop before anybody else can actually come and farm it before you. So the first thing we're going to talk about is playstyle with the sword and shield. So essentially this weapon feels like a middle ground between a true melee and ranged class with the bow. It has a lot of counter ability, a lot of built-in grit, staggers, stuns, debuffs, all while not feeling too stiff and can still be very mobile. Now, I say it might feel a little stiff because of the lock-in-place abilities, such as Shield Rush or Shield Bash, but it still feels nice when you connect those abilities, and overall, just a very solid weapon. Starting off with the positives of the sword and shield, it is great in 1v1 and small scale, especially in group-based activities such as arenas, OPRs, and wars. It's also very good because of the leadership buff, providing 10% damage to your entire group so long as you have the weapon out. It also has pretty decent CC/peel, being Shield Bash and Shield Rush perks and passives. Another thing is it has great mobility and escape due to Leaping Strike and Shield Rush. It has pretty solid chasing ability because of the Leaping Strike and all the slows in the kit, and of course very sticky attacks with the light attacks and heavy attacks. And another positive is the potential with Shield Bash. So you could follow up a Shield Bash with Explosive Arrow, you could follow it up with an Evade Shot, a Cannon, a Detonate. There's so many things you can do with Shield Bash that it just feels like you have so much control and freedom over it. Another thing I wanted to mention that not many people actually do, or I see do when they have a sword and shield, is the 3 different unpredictable swings. So you have the light attacks, you have the half charge heavy attacks, which still apply heavy attack buffs by the way, such as the 30% in power, and you have the full charged heavy attacks. I think these 3 attacks add a lot of variety to the sword and shield because you can change the timing up and you don't have to worry too much about being predictive with your attacks. Moving forward, we'll be talking about the negatives. So it is not as good in team play just because of the fact that Shield Bash gets cancelled too often and it has too many animation lock, leading to death and free hits from range. So essentially when you're fighting in a group fight, there's a lot of decks, there's some fire mages, and you use Shield Rush or Shield Bash, it locks you in place and you're essentially a free hit for anybody that's aiming at you, and there's nothing you can do about it. So you have to know when to use your abilities, otherwise you'll get punished significantly. Another negative is long ass cooldowns. This weapon has some of the longest feeling cooldowns in the game. The entire skill tree doesn't really have any cooldown reduction perks in it, so you're mainly relying on your gear if you don't already have refreshing. When you use your abilities incorrectly, the weapon just feels useless. So for example, you use a Leaping Strike on a target and they happen to roll it in time, it just feels like there's nothing else you can do to keep up with the target because you're locked in cooldown for 20 seconds. Same thing with Shield Rush and Shield Bash, also long cooldowns, and if you use the Shield Bash incorrectly or you miss, then you have no more defensive capabilities, which just does not feel nice at all. It's also very predictable with its abilities. For example, Shield Bash has an extremely short distance. Shield Rush can only go in one direction, just makes it so easily readable, and sometimes it straight up doesn't connect, which is really annoying as well. Which leads me into my next negative, which is sometimes abilities just don't connect, and this could be due to latency because I have been playing Sword and Shield on East servers and I am from West Coast, so I'm playing on about 100 to 120 ping. But sometimes when I chase someone and I'm not extremely close to them, it just doesn't connect. My light attacks don't connect, my Shield Rush doesn't connect. Unlike other weapons like Hatchet or Great Sword or Great Axe, which has extremely good distance and reach, you can just never walk away from them. But sometimes I feel like enemies can just walk away from my Shield Rush, from my light attacks, and it just doesn't feel nice at all. Again, I'm not sure if this is a true negative because I'm not sure if it's my latency or not, or just the Amazon spaghetti code. But either way, it just doesn't feel good at all. Moving forward, we'll be talking about the best in slot weapons and armor with this set. Now, if you haven't already, go check out my build guide. It'll be linked in the description below. It'll have the best in slot build for the bow, and this does not change as much with this build. So if you check out this build right here, the only things that are different that you'd want to change is that I have a medium chest piece. Make sure you get the light chest piece or else this build is not going to work on light armor. Also, you would want to replace one perk, whether it be refreshing or something else, for Leaping Strike, because Leaping Strike is essential to this build. It is very good. It's free damage for all attacks when you land your Leaping Strike on somebody. This is the most important ability in the build. Gear wise, it kind of stays the same without much variety or change. Now, when it comes to the shield, this is what I'm talking about. There is a hidden shield called Headbutt, which nobody really knows about, that I actually farmed a couple days ago to make sure it's actually droppable, and it has thrust resistance on a round shield. Now, the reason why this is so big is because round shields aren't usually allowed to have resistances on them. So this is one of the only shields in the game that does, and it has thrust, which is extremely good as a bow player. It also has Keeling Powered as well, which is great. For the third perk, it is Diminishing Shield Bash, which also isn't a bad complement to the 3 perk Purple's round shield. Now, this shield is kind of situational in a way, because moving on, I'll be talking about these swords. And because it has Keeling Powered, and these swords that I'm about to show you guys also have Keeling Powered, and they don't stack, you will not be able to match these swords with this shield. But I still want to mention these swords because they're great DPS weapons, and if you're going for full DPS instead of the extra thrust resist, these are the swords you want to use. Now, the first one is Shadow's Edge. Shadow's Edge is extremely good. It has Enchanted Rogue Keeling Powered. This is one of the best named weapons in the game. And then, of course, on the shield, you'd want Vicious and Jagged. So you have a total of 5 damage perks. The only downside about Shadow's Edge is it is kind of a random drop in Brimstone Sands. So maybe if you go on a chest run, you'll be able to find it there, because there's other options as well. Now, moving forward, so another great option is actually the Champion's Sword with Vicious, Penetrating Backstab, and Keeling Empowered. And this is what I mean by you'd want another shield with Enchanted and Jagged, because you want to match these swords and shields together. Now, Vicious, Penetrating Backstab, and Keeling Empowered is extremely good for chase. This sword is the best sword you want to chase somebody. Vicious and Penetrating Backstab is an illegal combo besides being on the PvP track weapon here. Now, for the final sword I wanted to mention is actually a crafted sword, and it'll be Attunement, Rogue, and Keeling Jagged. This is a sword you're going to want to pair with the Headbutt because it has no combating perks together, so you'll still have a total of 6 perks. And Attunement is also very good. The only problem with that is Attunement is not on any of the named weapons, and Attunement is still very good on every weapon that you have for DPS. So there it is, the top 3 swords you want along with each shield you want to use. Here it is on screen right here. Now, there is an honorable mention that I want to talk about. It's actually Scorpio. I know a lot of people would want to rock this, but it's for the fact that it has Empowering Leaping Strike on it and Trenchant Crits. I just don't think Trenchant Crits is the perk you want on a sword and shield pairing with the bow specifically, because there's no real opportunity to get a good Trenchant Crits hit off. Now, don't get me wrong, I think the weapon itself is extremely strong. I just would prefer something with more reliable DPS rather than relying all my damage on a heavy attack swing. Now, this here is the sword and shield tree, and it's very standard. This doesn't really change in any scenarios. Now, there is one thing I want to mention about the skill tree, that where you see I don't take any shield rush points. And you might be wondering, like, Improved Rush, Intimidating Rush, these are both extremely good perks. But the reason why you don't want to take them is because you want that Shield Rush into Shield Bash combo. And because you take these perks, you won't actually be able to pull it off. So essentially, if you want the Shield Rush into Shield Bash guaranteed, you can't take any of these perks here. Another perk that might be touched on a little bit that you're kind of wondering about is here on Sturdy Shield. And I do think the physical armor is good, but 15% physical armor on light actually isn't that much negation. It kind of falls into the same category as Shrinking Fortification, and because of that, it just isn't as good. Now, for some perks over here on the right as Defender, we have Sturdy Grip, Defensive Training, and High Grip. I've tried these out, and I don't really seem to feel a difference when I block and attack. It still feels like bow arrows mess up my shield really hard, and it also feels like melee attacks mess up my shield really hard. So these perks are definitely not necessary with the round shield. Another perk that I wasn't using before, I actually had my Recuperation point here in the Physical, Sturdy, and Shield, but Recuperation is extremely good, especially when you're in a group with a healer, or just for your pots as well. So make sure you take this when you're trying to use your healing and potions. You want to have the sword and shield out. Now, as for the bow, I've actually already got 3 different skill trees that you want to work with this build, and I'll show them up all here on screen. But if you want me to talk more about them, you can check in the video below about the entire bow guide, because remember, this is more about the sword and shield. So over in that other video, I talk about all the skill trees and why you'd want them and in what scenarios. Now, for the 4th and final thing I want to talk about, it'll be about each ability and how to use them. The first thing we're going to talk about is Shield Rush. So number 1, as I said earlier, you don't want to take the perks if you want to combo with Shield shield bash. Now, I have played with the perks activated and it does feel nice to have the extra weaken and the slow, but I just think the shield rush into shield bash is way too good. As for the shield bash, I can think of it as a better riposte in a way since it counters all grit and it also can't be stopped. Now what I mean by that is when a melee is running up to you and you have your shield bash up and you see them use an animation lock ability, you can easily counter that with your shield bash whether they have grit or not. Also, when you stun a target and you have on a Vorpal bow, you get a free heavy attack headshot if you take the 3-second stun, and it just feels super nice when you're able to get that free headshot off. As for leaping strike, you do gain more distance when you jump off of a cliff. Another thing that not most people know about is it can also be pivoted in mid jump, whether it be on the floor or off the hill. And the last thing I would say is you want to be able to juggle between the 3 attacks I talked about earlier. Being able to juggle between the 3 abilities and knowing when to use each one is super important to close range combat with the bow, sword, and shield. For example, when you leaping strike a target, you have to know whether or not to light attack, whether to do the half heavy attack or to do the full heavy attack so that it connects. And that's one of the biggest skill gaps that I see between the bow and sword and shield users. So make sure you really practice this one. And I promise you it'll benefit you so much in close combat fights and when you're chasing a target. And that about wraps it up for this video. If there's anything else that I missed, please feel free to leave it in the comments below. Appreciate you all for being here, and as always, make sure to subscribe please, because I'm trying to get to 1,000 by the end of May, and I would really appreciate it if I did hit it by then. I will be doing a giveaway at 1,000 subs on my Twitch channel, so feel free to stop by at any time at twitch.tv/adorian510. Most of the time I'm streaming wars, I'm streaming other content, I do VOD reviews, so if there's anything you need to become a better bow player, feel free to drop by and we can talk about it. Thank you all and have a nice day, and see you in the next one.